Committee will be in order. I'd like to welcome everyone to our second hearing of the day, a hearing on the fiscal year 2024 budget request for the Department of Commerce Office of Inspector General. Thank you to our subcommittee members and to Inspector General Gustafson for her presence here today. How do I pronounce your name?
Gustafson. Thank you.
Inspectors General serve as independent watchdog within the government and are a critical resource for Congress and for taxpayers. Inspector General, your office's oversight of the Department of Commerce is critical to ensuring that the immense amount of mandatory and discretionary funding appropriated to the department is spent in the best interest of the taxpayer and consistent with the department's mission to foster economic growth and opportunity for all. The fiscal year 24 budget request for Commerce, the office, $53 million, an increase of 5 or 9% over fiscal year 23 enacted level. The request includes inflationary adjustments and increases for proactive targeting of grant fraud. By comparison, the fiscal year 24 request for the Department of Commerce is $12.3 billion, an increase of $1 billion, 11% over the enacted level. It's important to note that over the previous 2 years, the Commerce Department was the recipient of an extraordinary amount of additional federal spending, well over $100 billion in additional spending. In fact, this spending has far eclipsed the annual discretionary appropriations level of the Commerce Department. So while the Office of Inspector General is authorized to use a portion of these funds to oversee the programs and activities that are the basis for this funding, a tremendous task lies ahead. Inspector General Gustafson, I look forward to hearing from you today about your whether and how in preparing to oversee all the recent funding directed to the Department of Commerce. Let me recognize now our ranking member, former Chairman Mr. Cartwright of Pennsylvania, for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to join you in welcoming Peggy Gustafson, the Inspector General for the Department of Commerce, to our subcommittee. Thanks for being here today. I'll echo. The Inspector General occupies a unique position, responsibility to oversee operation and performance of the Department of Commerce, promote the department's integrity, efficiency, accountability. I am proud of the strong funding increase we provided in last year's Appropriations Act for the work of the Inspector General, your office. I look forward to hearing how those investments will pay off and will be applied to continue the important oversight work of the IG across the Department of Commerce. I expect today we'll cover a wide range of topics. We'll want to hear about the progress the Commerce Department is making in dealing with the many challenges it is tasked to face. So once again, we welcome Inspector General Gustafson, and we look forward to your testimony. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Madam Attorney General, you're recognized for an opening statement. Without objection, your written statement will be entered into the record. You're recognized.
Thank you so much. Chairman Rogers, Ranking Member Cartwright, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to appear today and discuss the Office of Inspector General's budget and our strong oversight of the Department of Commerce's programs and initiatives. I'd very much like to first thank the members of the subcommittee for your long-standing support of OIG, including our fiscal year 2023 appropriation. I'm also very grateful for your support of our request to fund most of our work with direct appropriations instead of annual transfers. OIG works to deploy our resources strategically, and your support enables us to tackle emerging department initiatives while enhancing our ongoing oversight of the department's programs. Today I'll explain how we deploy our resources to key areas, including new work in the CHIPS and Science Act, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, and cybersecurity, as well as longstanding departmental priorities. First, programs associated with the CHIPS Act are a top priority for our office. The Act provides OIG $25 million over 5 years for program oversight. We're grateful for this funding, and we've identified several potential CHIPS-related challenges for the department. These include managing its workforce to meet new demands and implementing adequate controls and oversight. We're also building 2 audit teams, which will be vital to our independent, continuous oversight of CHIPS programs. Similarly, IIJA introduces new funding and new challenges for the department. OIG received $18 million for oversight of 3 IIJ broadband programs, and we've issued the first in a series of semi-annual reports summarizing broadband program status. The first of our IIJA-related audits is also underway. This is an audit of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program to determine whether NTIA properly dispersed program funds and whether the funds are being used as intended. A third focus area is the department's continuing efforts to improve its cybersecurity posture. A May 2021 executive order directed the government to move toward zero-trust cybersecurity principles. This is a challenge because the department must make this move while simultaneously addressing long-standing cybersecurity weaknesses. Of course, even as we're tasked with these initiatives, we must continue to provide exceptional oversight of long-standing departmental priorities. As a result of the subcommittee's support, OIG has been able to allocate staff to focus on many of these areas. We're creating an audit team to address the ongoing challenges in ensuring fair and secure trade, particularly in relation to China and Russia. We're also adding teams focused on NIST and enhancing oversight of NOAA's National Weather Service and its planned ship and plane recapitalization. In addition, we anticipate contracts and grants will continue to be attractive targets for fraudsters, and we've oriented our investigative work to identify and respond to this activity. Before fiscal year 2021, contract and grant fraud investigations accounted for roughly 35% of our cases. Today, they account for 65%. We're laying the groundwork to help prevent and detect fraud. As you know, our budget is people. In fiscal year 23, 72% of our budget is going to salaries and benefits. To further enhance our ability to respond to new and existing oversight responsibilities, our fiscal 2024 budget request is $55.8 million. It does include adjustments for inflation and supports our plan to have a staff of 252 by the end of that fiscal year. Now, on that note, I'd like to take this opportunity to share a bit about our staff, because they're, of course, the most important factor in our success. To be frank, when I became Commerce's IG, I walked into a difficult situation. Morale was very low and turnover was very high. The office had a lot of dysfunction, particularly among its leadership ranks. But I'm pleased to say that we've brought about a massive transformation. Improving our audit processes, our HR functions, and our information systems are just a few of our accomplishments. We've also rebuilt our Office of Investigations and refocused our capabilities and priorities onto the most vulnerable programs. And more importantly, our employees' morale has gone up dramatically. With the improvements we've made, our recruiting is the best it's ever been. We're attracting highly skilled and experienced candidates, we hire them quickly, and we retain them. We're now in our 4th year of very low turnover, and I'm very proud of the work the office does and the progress we've made. So in conclusion, I'm very grateful for the subcommittee and Congress's continuing support of OIG. I look forward to the tremendous opportunities ahead as we continue to provide independent oversight to help the department meet its missions and support Congress in its oversight roles. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm happy and looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed under the 5-minute rule, which will be enforced with questions for the witness. And I'll begin by recognizing myself. Madam Inspector General, the department received a large amount of mandatory funds last Congress, particularly through the CHIPS and Science Act, which included over $50 billion in mandatory funds for the CHIPS incentive program that will be administered by the NIST. Of that, the Office of the Inspector General received $25 million over a 5-year period to oversee the funds and the administration of grant awards. Your office's role will be further complicated with the task of overseeing a complex new grant program. What steps are you taking now to ensure your office is well positioned to adequately provide oversight of the CHIPS program?
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. And as you've noted, we were extremely grateful to get the money that we got in the CHIPS Act. You're exactly right. It's a new program. It's unlike the other programs that exist already in Commerce. And I would hazard to say it's unlike really any other program that the federal government is undertaking right now. It's very unique. So we are grateful for the monies we've received. As I noted in my statement, we are staffing up 2 teams to oversee CHIPS. And as we hire these folks, we are looking for the scientific and technical knowledge that will help us perform the reviews that we need to undertake. So what we are doing is we are staffing teams not only with solid auditors, but also people from the industry that understand how semiconductors work and what it means to be a semiconductor manufacturer. We're also staffing up, I think by our Office of Investigation, so that we can be well prepared to oversee this completely new program. We've also already undertaken a lot of outreach to the department so that they are telling us, they are keeping us abreast of what they are doing, briefing us on how the program is going. As you know, the NOFA was just released a couple weeks ago, and the applications will start rolling in. So it's really crucial that the department continue to have that level of communication with us so that we can be currently aware of what is happening and be prepared to do the oversight. So that's our plan. I'm very excited about the new folks we have going on, and we're looking forward to performing the oversight.
Well, in just a few months, the first awards
That's right.
are going to be made. How are you preparing for?
So we will have the teams in place. So we have already made some hires, and again, that is one of our top priorities, as we are in the process of staffing up our teams on that. So our goal will be to be currently informed and keep abreast on that. As I'm sure you also know, the CHIPS Act very specifically lays out, I think it is six areas for us to be undertaking oversight as it relates to the CHIP program, including whether, I think the very first one is whether the awardees are eligible for the awards. I mean, it really is kind of a life cycle oversight where the first thing we'll be looking at will be the nature of the awards, who are they being awarded, and whether they meet the, whether those meet the very specifically spelled out requirements, both of the program and the act, and of course in the guidance that has been produced by Commerce. We are right there with them. We of course are independent and working, I would say, more alongside them, but are doing it, I hate to say contemporaneously because audits take time, but certainly not waiting for the money to go out the door before we start those.
What are those 6 criteria, 6?
Oh, gosh, I was afraid you were going to say that. So I know, well, I can, if you don't mind, I will look. So, with apologies, thank you. And I will stop saying chips any minute. Stop saying. So. Oh my goodness, how does this happen? So.
Well, you can do that for the record.
I will absolutely. And what I'm happy to do is also, I will spell out further what that means as far as how the oversight will be rolled out. I'm so to do that, because some of the requirements deal with things later on in the process, whether the recipients of the awards are following the rules as it relates to other activities that they're undertaking and not doing business with actors that are not meant to be involved in CHIPS. So
I'll have further questions, but let me yield now to Mr. Cartwright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank you, Ms. Gustafson, for being here. I'm going to echo a lot of what the chairman just asked about CHIPS and Science Act with respect to the IIJA. So much of this money that was legislated in the last term is coming through the Department of Commerce, including $48 billion of broadband investments included in the bipartisan IIJA of 2021, and NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, is going to be charged with a big job there. Investing this money through competitive and formula grants that'll invest in basic broadband deployment needs, promoting, as they call it, digital equity, so that all parts of this country, urban and rural, are included with broadband availability. These projects are going to be critical to communities that are both blue and red in nature, where we all have an interest in ensuring that these funds are implemented responsibly. Now, in a report at the end of last year, your office identified ensuring prudent management and oversight of broadband infrastructure funding as a top management challenge, as you said, for the Department of Commerce in FY23. It shouldn't come as a surprise that tens of billions in new funding has placed additional demands on NTIA's workforce, its oversight processes, its business practices, and its financial management systems. In January, your office published the first in a series of semi-annual status reports on NTIA's broadband programs, and I'd like you, if you can, please briefly share your oversight efforts that your office is pursuing in the area, key takeaways from what you've found so far, and any preliminary observations or recommendations for ensuring the proper administration of this level of broadband financing.
Thank you, Ranking Member Cartwright. You're right, the IIJA was, I think it's probably fair to say, a shock to the system of NTIA, because although they had a role in the ARA, in the Recovery Act many years ago in a broadband with the BTOP program, they had kind of been out of the business of this type of grant making. And so, to your point, when the IIJA was passed, again, we were extremely grateful to receive funds for specific oversight so that we could dedicate bandwidth, if you will, since we're talking about burden, to this. And one of the things, again, our approach to oversight on IIJA, first it begins with what are the lessons learned that we can share from the prior programs that might help inform NTIA as they were, to your point, staffing up to a great deal to all of a sudden start planning for the disbursement of this money. And there were definitely lessons learned way back when in the Recovery Act under the BTOP program as far as administration and the importance of a skilled workforce as it relates to administration and disbursements of grants, which there is a tremendous demand for that in government writ large. So I think that was one of the crucial things for that. Our thoughts on IJA are very different from CHIPS. That's one of the things that's most interesting. CHIPS is so completely different from what the IJA program is. And so the concerns that we have in IIJA, are really kind of the more traditional concerns of, is it really going to do what is expected to do? Will it actually create will it actually bring broadband to communities that have previously been underserved? With that comes the risk sometimes of, is it a duplication of effort? There have already been concerns of, are they going to take steps to make sure that they're directing it to places that truly are underserved and unserved and not perhaps had already received the broadband through other efforts. So that's going to be an important thing. The other thing that's going to be crucial for us is these are projects that will take many years. And will be spread, there will be hundreds of projects under this, as opposed to CHIPS, where we're probably talking about a much smaller subset of recipients of a tremendous amount of money. So what's crucial for us is going to be getting the word out and building those relationships, because where we're going to see the issues really literally is on the ground in the areas about whether it's actually working. So it's a completely different set of risk factors. And again, our goal is to be there as perform the oversight as it's happening so that, we are looking at the implementation and then the delivery and whether it's really working and kind of have a multi-phase process.
Well, we're going to want to be in more frequent contact than one hearing a year on this, so will you work with us?
Nothing would make me happier than to come up more than one time a year and talk about the work that we're doing, truly. And I will bring up people way smarter than me to help us understand it, because we have tremendous talent in our office that I'd love to bring up. I'll take it. Thank you. Thank you.
I concur in that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Let me try not to boom you out today or this afternoon. Thank you, Inspector General Gustafson, for being here today, and I know your office plays a valuable role in maintaining the integrity, efficiency, and accountability of the Department of Commerce. Now, you noted in your testimony that the Office of Investigations has shifted from relying on hotline complaints to proactively investigating potential waste, fraud, and abuse and misconduct. During your tenure as the Department of Commerce IG, the number of cases opened through proactive efforts and referrals has risen significantly, and I applaud your ambition to provide better oversight to the department. Could you share with us kind of the metrics that help you determine when you go proactive? I know that you've got a hotline and people can call into the hotline, but from what I read, that doesn't get used a whole lot. And so you've gone proactive, and I like that because I think that's what is needed. You've got a tremendous amount of money in the Commerce Department. I mean, an astronomical amount. And so can you give us a little bit of an idea of the metrics that you use to go after, to find that waste, fraud, and abuse?
So although although I will say that we are a really fairly small IG, we are under 200 people as it stands today for oversight of all of commerce. One of the things I am most proud of is the fact that we do have data analytics capability in our office. We have a very solid data analytics team, and I really am very heartened to see that our Office of Investigations works very, very closely with data analytics. Because really what it is about, of course, is the data mining, is the looking for the fraud indicators, and really that's what leads to the proactive cases that we find on our own. I don't know so much that it's a metric as much as it is kind of a proven success. I mean, I think there's proven success that's what works. I think there are a lot of tremendous examples of that being extremely successful in the area of pandemic relief. There's been a lot of data analytics, as this committee I'm sure knows, there's been a lot of fraud. But I mean, there's a lot of data out there that with data matching, you can see where you can see indicators of perhaps somebody double dipping, or it doesn't make any sense for somebody located in a certain position to be, in an area to be seeking that kind of assistance. So we have really tried to make better use, frankly, of that capability we have of working with other departments, because that's crucial as well. So for example, in the broadband effort, even though the vast majority of CHIPS funds went to commerce, agriculture has a broadband program, of course. I mean, they're kind of spread out throughout the government. So it's really important that we have those teams reaching out and working together. Again, I can't say so much as a metric, but I am very heartened. We are very pleased to have the amount of cases being generated proactively, because you're right, it's not that the hotline isn't important, it's crucial. I mean, and we haven't abandoned the hotline. We take the hotline complaints very seriously, but most of the good cases really come through really hard work and generating it yourself, so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I request unanimous consent to submit for the record a recent Wall Street Journal article published January 29, 2023, which sounded the alarm that a top-tier nuclear weapons research institute in China has obtained American-made semiconductor chips more than a dozen times in recent years, despite being on the U.S. export restrictions blacklist. Thank you. Right. In light of the $50 billion that the department received from the CHIPS and the Science Act last Congress to bolster semiconductor chips production in the U.S., this report sheds light on a very serious accountability shortfall. Have you heard of this at all?
I have, yeah.
You have, okay,
yeah.
Great. So is the Office of Inspector General investigating allegations of American-made semiconductor chips being obtained by foreign adversaries?
Well, I couldn't speak to any investigation, but I would note that one of the things I'm very grateful for, and again, it was with this subcommittee support, is we now have a team dedicated to trade, where, we certainly did oversight of trade before, but one of our goals on that is to do a review where we are looking to see if whether the restrictions that are supposed to be happening as it relates to certain technology reaching certain actors, whether that's happening and how well that's happening. So I think that, and that's on our audit plan. I think I might have even mentioned it in my testimony. I can certainly speak to that. And again, I'm very grateful that we can have a team dedicated to that, because that's something we didn't have a trade team 2 years ago. So it just lets us address that quicker than we could have before. So
Thank you very much, and now I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Cartwright and Inspector General, thanks for being here today. I want to follow up on what Ranking Member Cartwright was talking about. In Allegheny County, which is a very rural county I have in Maryland, my students couldn't access online classes. They lacked the reliable internet, and they fell further and further behind, especially those that were already behind. We lacked the mental health ability, behavioral health ability. We lacked jobs ability. So it's really making it hard for rural America. Of the $65 billion, you folks on BEAD got $42.5 billion.
Right.
So we've been working diligently with your head, April Delaney, of that group. We've met numerous times, been out to the district, and I just want to know what you think we can do to ensure the recommendations that NTIA needs to do to make sure the BEAD money goes where it's needed most and doesn't go to waste. This can change America, and we got to get it right.
Right.
And we need to see them here more often. I couldn't agree more.
So I have a couple thoughts on that, so thank you, Mr. Trone, for that. One of the things is, of course, the BEAD program, as you know, it starts as a block grant program, and it's reliant on the FCC maps, and so in that way, it's still in its nascent stages.
Talk about the FCC maps. How important is it to get that right?
It's crucial to get that right? So I know that's because that's going to be a big driver for the money are the FCC maps, and so that's going to be important. Like I said, we are grateful that we are going to be undertaking oversight of that. I would also note, to your point, that the department has a role in this as well. If I can, for 1 second, just kind of distinguish OIG from the department, because the department certainly has formed a group that is going to be performing, as they should, performing oversight of IIJA and the BEAD program. And it's going to be, I think that it's going to be crucial, and we know how that's going, and that you know how that's going. And so that's one way I think that, as always, Congress can be helpful, would be, and kind of like has been mentioned here before, season passes maybe for everybody, where the conversations are happening and the questions are being asked, because it is, again, it's ARA was a long time ago, so this is almost it's almost a new program in that way, and so I think that there is always a risk inherent in a lot of money in a short amount of time with big goals, and so I think we need to be partners on that, and I think, alongside,
I think we're on the same page, but I just can't, as a business guy myself,
Sure.
and a capitalist, you need to really be in on this one.
Right.
Because them going from here to $42 billion,
That's
it's
right.
like, wow, it's so easy to get it wrong, but so
Right.
important for rural America
Right.
to get it right.
Right.
Next partner, next subject, infrastructure, scientific innovation. NIST runs scientific innovation for the country, National Institute of Science and Technology. Their facilities in Gaithersburg, we've seen they're stuck in the last century.
Right.
The last century. China has copied our facilities 5 times and has gleaming new facilities in China, as they copied exactly what we did before we figured it out. Mm-hmm. Now we're trying to get our facilities back up to where they need to be, so we can continue to lead the world in standards and in meteorology, et cetera, all scientific innovation, not let the Chinese take the lead. And so Mr. Cartwright and I went up there last year. We were able to get the foundation for infrastructure increased to $130 million, which is really a drop in the bucket compared to the problems they have. And this year, the president's budget brought it in $260 million, which is going to move us closer. But, I mean, we are billions behind. And our science and our businesses, American businesses are paying the price for this because we don't have a partner in government to help business. So what can your office do to ensure that this construction money that's been allocated gets spent efficiently and equitably to address this big backlog we have?
Well, that's definitely on our radar, and again, and I don't want to overthank you all, but again, we are very grateful for subcommittee's support because we do now have a team dedicated to NIST. And to your point, there was also money in the CHIPS program for NIST facilities, as you know. And again, I think it's universally acknowledged that it was a long time coming, but it's a massive amount of money. I think in CHIPS, it's $200 million a year for 5 years. So we do have, we do intend to perform oversight in that area. One of the projects on our audit plan involves deferred maintenance, because what's happening in a lot of facilities, both in NIST and NOAA, I would note as well, because NOAA has, I think, also an issue with aging facilities. And so it happened, it's government. But we do have a report, not a report, but a review plan to do to look at the deferred maintenance and how they are handling deferred maintenance and trying to, I guess, almost drink from a fire hose or whatever, turn a phrase you want to say. So we do plan to do work in this area. There's a lot of oversight work that our office would love to do in NIST. It's an incredibly important part of the government. We are very grateful that we have a team. We just did a report on the manufacturing extension program. That's another program that saw a massive increase in the amount of money that program is going to be distributing. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we're going to do our best, and look forward to telling you about it and hearing from you, and especially, I know you know Gaithersburg well, so
We look forward to seeing you back before the end of the year on this one again.
Okay.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman yields back, Mr. Garcia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Inspector General, thank you. Good to see you again. Mike, I have two topics. The first is related to sanctions, and I know the pure mission of sanction enforcement falls under OFAC, which is also a relatively small organization. But with a lot of focus is on the war in Ukraine, the weapons, the humanitarian aid, but I think the bulk of Americans have forgotten the power of the sanctions that we have imposed, not only on our own companies, but worldwide against, effectively several of our allied nations, right? Who is actually tracking the enforcement of the sanctions against Russia right now? Who has direct oversight of that? And from your perspective, if it's not your team that's doing that, what is your assessment of how the enforcement side of the sanctions package that we have against Russia is progressing, or being, I guess, maintained? That is a better way of saying it.
I'm going to promise to get back to you on some of that, because I don't have an opinion to share with you on that right now. We do, with the new trade team that we were able to constitute, we do, on the list of things to do in addition to exports that, shouldn't be going to places, are how that is working, whether those export administration regulations are working, whether they're being done. Exactly right. No, that's exactly right. So it is certainly on our plan. It is not something we've done before. But on your other point of the question, I apologize. I can't tell you who else. I can't direct you to somebody else, and I'd love to have the chance to take that back.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
I'd love to see it. My maybe it's a healthy paranoia or just skepticism, but I suspect that we are not actually monitoring and enforcing the sanctions at the levels that we probably should be, and we're allowing the Russian equivalent of your organization and commerce on their side to regain a pulse where we may not have really needed to, right? So I want to make sure that we're really putting a boot on the throat of their economy from a commerce perspective, and so if we can get that information.
Okay.
And whatever entity you think is most appropriate to answer that, I'd love to take that offline if we can.
Okay, thanks.
The second question I have is related to CHIPS. I voted for CHIPS after probably 6 hours in the skiff with, actually, Secretary Raimondo was very gracious with her time and her technical subject matter experts to help me get to a yes. My concern was not our ability to invest on the commercial side, but to invest in the commercial side and then coordinate with the defense side to make sure that we're not just building next generation chips, 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer wafers that have zero applicability to high-end weapon systems that we desperately need to cut our dependency from Taiwan and China, frankly, on. So, in other words, we can make a chip for a car, but that chip is then not cross-deckable into a hypersonic weapon because Commerce didn't coordinate with the Pentagon on the requirements, the verification, the sell-off criteria. Who is, and I was given assurances that it was hand in glove, partners going down range, Commerce and DOD. Heidi Shue made the same commitment at the Pentagon. Who is overseeing that coordination to make sure that the $50 billion and whatever the final number ends up being is not just generating a commercial product, but also generating products for defense applications? That should be you in your organization, but. Or at
And
least-
perhaps Rob Storch, who's the IG for Department of Defense. I mean, I'm just thinking, you know what I mean? Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How is that relationship with him, and what's the status of that? It was very early days, nascent development. This is where
Right.
you can fix problems and
Right.
avoid problems.
Right.
If you can touch on that, please.
I can touch on Rob Storch, who I know very well. I mean, I know he's new to DOD, but he's been in the IG community for a long time. I think perhaps what I might prefer to do is perhaps he and I could come and talk
That'd be
to
great.
you.
Yeah, I would
you know?
prefer that as well,
Yeah.
'cause that's a
Yeah.
deeper dive
Yeah.
conversation. Again, a very healthy paranoia, but I've seen this. I've been on the industry side for over a decade where commercial companies like Intel will go downrange. They'll build an exquisite application for an unclassified commercial purpose, and they leave the DoD side in the dust because the market is on the commercial side and the profit is on the commercial side. So I want to make sure that we stay tied out. The national security implications of this are huge.
Right.
So I would love if we can get
Okay.
the right folks in the right room.
Right.
Probably in the classified
Yeah,
side,
right.
and make sure that we're tying out.
Okay, I'll,
Thank
we
you.
will make that happen. Thank you.
Mr. Russ?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. General Gustafson, thank you for being here today. I've got a comment first, and then I got a question for you. The comment is, I'm new to this committee. This is the first time we've met, but you've been there since 2017 in your current capacity. And your driver says here, I'm referring to page 12 of your testimony, that 93% of OIG employees rating internal communications from leaders as effective. That's a direct result of your leadership. That is very rare. I want to compliment you on it. I was a Navy veteran for 20 years. Sometimes you have good leadership and sometimes you have bad. With all the tasks that you have before you, that is an incredible statistic. And if the recruiting is the best it's ever been and you keep people, that is a direct testament to your leadership. And I'm very impressed by that.
Thank you.
So you don't need to comment on that. It's just, it's rare. It's rare in government service, it's rare in the military, and so whatever you've got, put it in a bottle because it's lightning. So then I'd like to refer to the IJA, which is a term I'd never heard before. Again,
sorry.
in Congress, but now I'm going to use it.
Right.
And $65 billion with the stated intention of ensuring that every American has access to reliable high-speed internet. That's a staggering amount of money.
Right.
And if you're talking about 250 million Americans between the ages of 18 and 80, a significant number of those people already have high-speed internet. So that's a lot so then it just goes up from there. I come from a rural district, highly rural in Texas, and so it's very important to us. So I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to get some of that. But I look at the NTIA, and we'll use $48 billion of that funding to implement new programs, expand and extend middle mile infrastructure, direct funding to tribal governments for broadband deployment on tribal lands, which is great. I'm on Interior as well. But then there's one that you're going to have to account for. And it's a term that I'd never heard until the last few years. And I'm curious what the definition is and how you find measures of effectiveness for promotion of digital inclusion and equity. I don't understand if the idea is to give everybody high-speed internet,
Right.
that should cover the whole thing. Why do we have to say something like that? And now it's your job to account for that.
Right.
So how do you do that?
So, TBD, and I'm not being flip about that, but the Digital Equity Program, which we did receive money for, absolutely, and we will do oversight, and that is very much in its nascent stages. I mean, I don't think any money outside of planning grants has gone out the door, but it is a good question. You know, and as you can imagine, much of what we do really is taking the requirements, what is it supposed to be doing, and then asking, did you achieve that, and how are you saying you achieved that, right? And then just judging the answers on that. I would anticipate that will be exactly what the work is. I will not begin to predict what our recommendations and findings will be, but I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, but we did get money specifically for that, even though it's a smaller program. We will absolutely be doing oversight in that, so we're grateful for that, and
Right.
so we'll.
Well, I'm assuming it's just a head scratcher because I've never heard anybody actually define that. So if it doesn't have a definition, how do you determine
Right.
measures of effectiveness? And I think if we're getting everybody what they need and it's all
Right.
the same,
Right.
then it speaks for itself. You don't need to include words like that. So I see it a lot in a lot of the things now that I've been in Congress for a year and a half. I see it everywhere. Nobody has ever been able to define it. And it's kind of frustrating when you have to audit that.
Right.
And then justify it, and then we're going to ask for a report on it. When you take that information and scratch
Right.
your head and go, what does that mean?
Right.
We've already got this covered. So
Right.
that was the only question.
Okay.
I do want to thank you again for being here.
It's nice to meet you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I noticed the gentleman's remarks about and I would guess that you're an expert at that.
Well played.
Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be back with you again. Thank you for being here, Ms. Gustafson. I just came from the Budget Committee hearing on the administration's FY24 budget request, which charts $1 trillion deficits into perpetuity and adds trillions to the $32 trillion in debt. So I'm in a mood to look at must-haves versus would like to have. And when I want to really see what Congress is required to do, what the federal government's required to do versus what it likes to do, I go to the source, and I go to Article 1, Section 8. And going through the different bureaus that you have overview, that you have jurisdiction over, I'm not finding a lot in Article 1, Section 8. So ITA, BIS, EDA, MBDA, BEA, Census Bureau. Let's talk about the census. Let's talk about 2020 census. There were massive problems with the 2020 census. And I note in your testimony that you have a section titled Ensuring an Accurate 2030 Census. And I'm glad you're getting a head start on 2030, but the problems with 2020 still really haven't been dealt with. What we see is that populations that were undercounted included the states of Arkansas, Florida, Illinois, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Texas. The original census reported that Florida needed only 171,000 more residents to gain another congressional seat, but the survey showed Florida was undercounted by over 750,000 people. The Bureau said that Texas needed only 189,000 more people to gain another congressional seat, but the survey showed that Texas was undercounted by 560,000 people. Minnesota would have lost a congressional seat if it had had 26 fewer residents, but the survey showed the state was overcounted by 216,000 people. Rhode Island would have lost a seat if the Census Bureau had counted 19,000 fewer residents, but it was overcounted by more than 55,000 people. So what you have is a massive shift, really, that would have resulted in about a 6-state shift if current trends apply, and that the alarm bells were set off very early, and not only about the influence of the pandemic, which was proven not to be borne out in the numbers, because you actually had increased flight from blue states to red states rather than less flight. So one thing that is proving to be of concern is this use of a differential privacy procedure and the contribution of that to essentially intentionally changing the results and the introduction of false statistics into the numbers to achieve the results that we achieved. Can you comment on that? And I'd just like to hear how you all preceded the census to kind of ensure that it would have been accurate versus what you're doing now to kind of review what the problems were and why.
So you are, of course, correct that we are, that planning for 2030 is well underway as is normal in the census. And to that end, we are performing oversight in that area. But we certainly still are doing work in the area of 2020. We are working on things like the post-enumeration survey. There were a lot of questions about group quarters. So our work there does continue apace. I will tell you that I cannot speak eloquently of, I do understand the issue of differential privacy. I do not know off the top of my head, I can't make that connection to the things that the Census Bureau does in the name of differential privacy for those purposes as it relates to the count. I'm not aware of that. I'm not sure what that connection is, so that I can't really answer that question. Unfortunately, I'm sorry about that, but
Can you commit to looking into the addition of that and the impact that it had on the results? Because not only did it have an impact on the constitution of this Congress, but the appropriation of funds
right.
is, unless we correct for that, we're going to be doubling down on an error, Mr. Chairman. We're going to be sending money based on census data that is false to states that don't deserve it at the expense of states that do deserve it. And so if we need to actually make the corrections in our own legislation to ensure that taxpayer funds are appropriately sent out. So I would urge that
right.
we both have some work to do.
Right,
So thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
For members who have questions or comments. And I'll recognize myself. Let me talk to you about EDA, a favorite topic of mine. In your request, or in EDA's request, they would receive significant supplemental funding dedicated to supporting coal communities. This funding would make essential investments that contribute to the long-term success of rural communities. Is EDA effectively managing the hiring challenges associated with administering these vast sums of grant funding that have been appropriated in recent years?
Chairman Rogers, I do believe that when we looked at that, we were, it was generally a positive news story that we did feel like EDA was doing a good job. I can get back to that. I think that was earlier on when the funds started kind of flowing in. We certainly did have conversations with EDA, as I noted before, to talk about that, but I'm happy to get you more specifics about that, but
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Your 24 budget request includes additional money for proactive targeting of contract and grant fraud. Do you have any audits or investigations planned for the funding included in the American Rescue Plan?
So we are the proactive, and we are, as I noted, we are already with the resources we have undertaking proactive initiatives as it relates to the American Rescue Plan and EDA and their administration of the revolving loan fund and some other things. So we are doing some proactive work in the investigative area that I'd be happy to brief you on sometime. We also do have some audit work. The audit work currently for under ARP is actually related to NIST and NOAA, but the proactive work being done on is related to EDA. So
We talked about earlier here rural broadband. That's important to a lot of us, particularly my home state. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act had $45 million to address broadband deployment. I want to ensure that these investments in broadband infrastructure will in fact benefit rural communities. How will your office help ensure that these broadband funds will be used for their intended purposes and that they're reaching our rural communities?
So one of the things that we are doing as it relates to IIJA, as I think I mentioned previously, we certainly are having proactive, we're having conversations and doing everything we can proactively with NTIA as it relates to their administration of this program, including asking them to allow, taking part in trainings, having our auditors speak to the folks who are involved in administering the program, and our investigators to talk about what some of the things that should cause concern, what they should be on the lookout for. The other thing we're doing, given the nature of IIJA, is we are conducting as much outreach as we can with state and local entities, because just the nature of these projects is such that really I think it's going to be crucial that they know who we are and why we're here, because very much for these broadband projects, the folks who are going to know if it's not doing what it's intended are in Kentucky. Do you know what I mean? Or are in, or are in Maryland, or, and so it's going to be, it's really important to us. And I will note that many IGs are doing that. I mean, the Infrastructure Act in general, kind of writ large, has a lot of that, such that the IGs of agriculture, transportation, EPA, energy, and myself, we're working together to see if we can help with outreach, where if one is doing outreach, we can talk about the other programs, et cetera. It's a very much an all hands on deck, because it's going to be crucial to have those relationships at the much smaller level than just Washington DC. That's
Is NTIA equipped to help?
Well, again, they are doing the right things. I will let you know later whether that worked, which is to say they are staffing up, they are having oversight groups, they are allowing us into these conversations and both talking about OIG and kind of making those connections for us, so that we are heartened by that, because I think it's really crucial, because we're not really, we're happy to detect the fraud afterwards. We'd rather prevent it. And we'd rather have the programs work as intended, rather than issue an audit saying this was a disaster. We would rather have these programs be successful. So, I'm heartened by the outreach and the levels of communication. I know from firsthand experience, it's crucial to make sure that you all know if it starts going poorly, and I will commit that will happen, because it's really important. I find Congress to be such an incredibly important stakeholder, and we report to you, so that I think, again, we will continue this conversation.
Well, you've just demonstrated the wisdom of us having hearings with inspectors general before we have conversation with the secretary and staff. It helps us understand what's going on. It gives you a chance to crow about your good works, which is multiple. So anyway, thank you for your testimony.
We very much appreciate the opportunity to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cartwright?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Gustafson, your office, back on the theme of EDA, it's really important to a lot of us here, because of so many struggling communities economically. Your office has undertaken extensive oversight work of EDA's management of disaster and pandemic supplemental funds. In 2021, this subcommittee held a hearing to conduct oversight of EDA's CARES Act grant making. And since then, EDA has distributed about $3 billion since that hearing under the same program. Recognizing the challenge that EDA faced in ensuring adequate oversight of grant programs under these circumstances, your office recommended in 2020 that EDA develop and implement a comprehensive workforce plan. You remember that?
Yeah.
Okay. And more recently, in your report on the top management challenges for the Department of Commerce, your office identified, quote, ensuring the integrity of grant programs, unquote, including those administered by EDA, as a critical ongoing challenge. So it's a simple question, and I'd like you to be specific and give examples. What steps have you seen EDA take to address the challenge of effectively awarding and overseeing this grant funding that has provided a lifeline to so many struggling communities?
So I know that EDA, again, I believe that EDA listened to us. I mean, I do think that what we saw was consideration of those recommendations, and we were heartened to see that, and they did staff up, and we were generally satisfied with that. Again, I will get back with you if there's something still outstanding. I'm sorry that I'm sorry that I can't do that right now, but I do know that we appreciated them listening to us. We felt that they were paying attention and hearing us and taking our recommendations seriously. But I will get back with you on specifics. So
I'd
Yeah.
like you to do
Yeah.
that. And we'll follow up directly with you,
okay,
if that's all right.
of course.
And then talking about trade and commerce in the global economy, I want to ask you, given the Department of Commerce's increasingly important roles and responsibility in trade and commerce in the global economy, what is your office doing to invest in your oversight of the department's role in that area?
So we have formed a trade team, thanks to the support of the subcommittee in fiscal year 2023. So we do have a team. I think I might have mentioned that we have undertaken a review of the role in commerce of removing trade barriers. Now, that's a report that is not public yet, but that will be the first report that comes out of that team. Again,
Did you say removing trade barriers?
Yes.
Okay.
But the next two kind of items in the hopper, if it were, relate to China, China's military fusion strategy, and whether commerce is, like I had mentioned previously, is doing what it is supposed to as far as making sure that things that are not supposed to be sold there is happening. And the second review is about the prohibitions that have been imposed as far as exports to Russia and the Belarus pursuant. So those are the planned work for the team, because we thought that those were, as you can imagine, of the highest priority. So that's the plan. So.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Just to follow up a little bit on Mr. Elsey's comments, where the NTIA is using $48 billion to fund these four things in your testimony, and the last one being to promote digital inclusion and equity. How much of that $48 billion was allocated to promote digital inclusion and equity?
I'm going to get you that right now, I think.
All right,
So.
that'd be great.
So, and I'm sorry, I knew this off the top of my head 4 hours ago, but Apologies. So the digital equity program is $2.75 billion.
$0.75 billion.
Yeah.
All right. And exactly, can you give me a description of it, and tell me what, I don't understand that phrase.
Right. And
Probably most of my constituents don't either.
well, and to be perfectly honest, since we haven't started looking at it, we haven't scoped out our first review on that, just given that it's in the notice.
Fair enough.
That is given in the notice that I could
Can you
tell
get
you
back
what
to me on
they
it?
say. I'm sorry.
Can you get back to me on it then? Or-
Well, I back you on it?
No, can you get back to me
Oh,
on
of
it?
course, no, of course. No, I'm sorry. I thought, so, yeah.
And then one other question for you. As part of your review of the Department of Commerce, do you ever look at programs whose authorizations have expired or are not authorized at all?
We look at programs. I mean, if there's a program going on in commerce, we look at it. If it's happening and we have the bandwidth, we look at it. Yeah.
Okay, so if the congressional authorization that comes from an authorizing committee has expired, then you note that, or what do you do with that?
Well, we don't do anything with it in that if the program is still happening, do you know what I mean? We are overseeing what commerce is doing, if that makes any sense to you. So, the trigger for us is FirstNet still happening? Do you know what I mean? Like, things that are awaiting authorization. So I don't know that it's a trigger as much. I do know that there are programs awaiting authorization. I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
but looking at whether it has a congressional authorization or not.
No, I don't think we've ever addressed, I don't think.
It's something you don't look
Right,
at, you
right,
don't address. Okay,
right.
that's what I wanted to
Yeah, I'm
understand.
sorry, yeah.
Okay, all right,
yeah.
thank you, and
Okay.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to take a stab at digital inclusion and equity. I've talked to the folks at your team a bit about this, and it seems like it's all about how we include groups that have been left behind, inclusive, and be equitable about it. And there's kind of two groups that have been left behind in the broadband, and that's folks in my district, in the very rural areas, that we just didn't pay any attention. And we're still in rural, and we don't have connectivity. We've got opioids and addiction and not have mental health resources. We haven't been included, and it hasn't been equitable. And I think there's other groups in the inner cities that are having the same problem. They haven't been included, and it hasn't been equitable to include them. So it's kind of like on the spectrums that you've got to get it right. They're kind of hard to get groups to go get them and include them in this transformational opportunity of $42 billion you have to get it right.
Right. And I guess the only point I was trying to make was just our oversight hasn't started in that such that
Yeah,
I could not begin to testify about what that is.
What happened at this, Mr. Klein had some really good questions. What happened that we didn't count all those folks? What slowed that count down? What made that count so difficult to get everybody included?
Well, I think we all know that 2020 was like any census ever, right? I mean, like anything that could happen did happen, which was interesting to me coming from 2010 wasn't so hot either in a way, because I wasn't at Commerce in 2010, but you might know that 2010 the handhelds didn't work and it became a completely paper-driven census, and then in 2020, of course, we had, among other things, a global pandemic. So now I'm not drawing the conclusion of that's there wasn't a pandemic in Illinois. I mean, you know what I mean? So I'm not trying to draw that conclusion.
Why were certain states just never got counted? What groups never get counted?
Oh, I can't possibly answer that question. I'm sorry. I mean, we have not done a review. We have not, and I will say that will not, because we do not have the expertise. I will never be able to testify as the Commerce IG of what the population of Illinois is. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's something that is such a tremendous task, and as much as we do great work in census, that is something kind of
Well,
beyond
to
our
his point,
ken.
we've got to get it right in the future.
Sure.
Because so many things are predicated on it with the
Right.
formulas
Well,
that
that's
we
an ex-
follow.
yeah,
So we've
that's
got to
right.
get it right.
Yeah.
My other question was, we talked about infrastructure again, and that's something this body really doesn't do well. Earlier today, we talked about the Bureau of Prisons.
Right.
And we don't rebuild our prisons for today's world. We built our prisons 30 years ago, and for a world of locking people up and throwing away the key versus a world of redemption and second chances, which we're trying to do today. So infrastructure at NIST, another problem. I'd love if the committee, down the road could come up to NIST. It's right here in Gaithersburg, and you'd see the deplorable condition, and we'd be embarrassed as Americans for the conditions that we have in the National Institute of Science and Technology. That should be, a shining star in the hill, and it's not. And so we're working to make that better with these investments. But what else hurts us when I talk to the director of NIST, what I hear from her a lot, I'd like you to comment on it, is we don't have good facilities, and China does. Where do those good young researchers go?
Well, I not to carry NIST water, but I think NIST has some good researchers, I will say. I mean, I've been to NIST, it's.
We have great people.
Yeah.
Where do we, when our facilities are in the Stone Ages, and China has gleaming labs, and they're happy to support you, where do those researchers go?
Well, I'm going to say that you're thinking they probably go to China. So, I just don't know, I just,
That was what we were told on the ground, point
Right.
blank. The young researchers can't get the grants here, China's offering the grants, then China takes all the intellectual property, they take all the advances, and we get nothing. Disappointing.
Right,
I yield back.
thank you.
Someone goes back. Does any of the members wish to be?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. China steals our intellectual property.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we're on that topic, because I'm perusing and looking at your agency responsibilities, and I've got responsibility here under Article 1, Section 8. Congress shall promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So let's talk about PTO. Patent and Trademark Office, you have said that several of the challenges facing PTO include fraudulent or inaccurate applications or registrations despite initiatives launched in response to an FY 2021 audit report that you all initiated and the requirements of the Trademark Modernization Act of 2020, legislation that we passed. So are you all pursuing another investigation or another audit to explore the continued problem of fraudulent or inaccurate applications or registrations?
We have a lot of work. We do have 2 dedicated teams at PTO, so we do have a lot of work in that area.
Good.
I will be happy to get back to you on, specifically on fraudulent trademark. We have a, PTO has although it has a lot of money, but it has a lot of issues. There are a lot of legacy systems and issues like that, but I'm happy to talk to you
Yeah,
about what our
I'm
future
looking
work
at
is.
your list of
Yeah.
bullets. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
You've got a problem with timeliness, or PTO has a problem
Yeah.
with timeliness for processing patents and trademarks, improving review quality and perception by its customers, a backlog of applications
Right.
awaiting initial examination. This all contributes to the problems that Mr. Trone was mentioning about our lack of ability to compete in what is an international contest of ideas. I'm looking at your last bullet. Contract award processes need to be strengthened, including $22 million in questioned cost related to PTO's use of non-competitive contracts. Can you talk about that?
So, so that was, we've done a large amount of work, because PTO has some massive projects undertaken to try to modernize their legacy systems. And so that finding was related to,
They're putting stuff out, but
With-
they're contracting
right,
for improvement of these legacy systems, but they're doing it under non-compete contracts?
well, there were questions about that. I mean, I hate to
But you don't have the
disagree.
results of that yet.
No, I don't think so. And I think the other thing that I think might be, I would like to offer up is, I would like to have, if it's okay with you, I'd like to have maybe our head of investigations talk about some of the work that we've kind of tried to do in the patent and trademark area. It gets very complicated very
Love to,
quickly,
love to.
given the international nature of a lot of the stuff that we're talking
I'm
about.
on the IP Subcommittee on Judiciary. So
Okay, okay.
It's
Okay,
good that
Okay.
I would love to talk to him. or
Great.
her. Because I'm seeing that with the additional FY23 funding, you've been able to expand your team
Right.
and initiated an evaluation of PTO and the department's ethics programs to prevent financial conflicts of interest by PTO patent examiners.
Right.
And that is something that is becoming apparent to you? Is that what's happening?
That is something that was of concern to us, given some of the things that we had seen and heard, and so we thought it was important to undertake a review of how the ethics program was going at
Yikes.
PTO, yes. Uh-huh.
All right, I look forward to hearing about that. I want to give you help in that area. So the two areas that I've covered, both of which have justification in the Constitution, I think the other areas that I mentioned, which do not, could probably spare some resources to be directed to help you to address those core functions of government that you're directed by the Constitution to perform. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the time and the input, and I yield back.
Thank you for your questions.
Anyone else have a wish? Hearing none. Thank you, Inspector General Gustafson, for attending, and more importantly, thanks for your great work
Thank you.
back there in the shop.
Thank you. Well, thank the team. We have a tremendous staff, so thank you. But thank you for the opportunity. I'm really looking forward to further conversations. Our work is so much more impactful when we can talk to you about it, and you can ask the department about it and stuff. So I'm extremely grateful for this opportunity and to continue the conversation. So,
We may do this again.
okay. Okay.
That concludes today's hearing. Without objection, all members will have 7 days to submit additional written questions for the witness or additional materials for the record. And with that, the hearing is adjourned.